Right, so in this video, we are going to take a step back and revisit fractions and decimals, and we are going to bring in percents as well. And so your goal for this lesson is I can convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. And so I need you to sort of dig up your knowledge from converting between fractions and decimals, because now we're going to convert between not only those two, but we're going to add percents in the mix. So we're going to go from percents to fractions, percents to decimals, decimals to fractions, decimals to percents, fractions to decimals, fractions to percents, and so on and so forth. I'm going to do a quick refresher from decimal to fraction and fraction to decimal, but then I'm going to bring percent back in. Remember that you can always go back to the video in the decimal unit if you need a more in-depth refresher. It's called decimal to fraction, and then there's another one called fraction to decimal if you need, like I said, a more in-depth review. But otherwise, this is as review as I'm going. So, how to convert from decimal to fraction. So, first what we need to do is to say this in word form. So this is 32 hundredths. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 32 and put it over 100, since it's 32 hundredths. And then we need to find the GCF. And by finding the GCF, we can then simplify this. And so the GCF, I believe, is going to be 4. And so we're going to divide the top and the bottom by 4. And so 32 divided by 4 is 8. And 100 divided by 4 is 25. And so your answer is 8 over 25. Now, 1.6. So this right here is going to be your whole number. So this is going to be 1. And so the way you say this is 1 6/10. And so this is going to be 6/10. So 1 6/10. Now, all you need to do is simplify 6/10, okay? And so the GCF here is 2, so you're going to divide the top and the bottom by 2. So this is going to be 1 3/5. Now here we have 4 75 hundredths. So again, 4 75 over 100. Here the GCF is 25, so we're going to divide the top and the bottom by 25. So our answer is 4 3/4. All right, so that's how we go from decimal to fraction. Now, how do we go from fraction to decimal? This was the more complicated one. There were a couple different ways that you could do it. The first way that you could do it is, can you make the denominator, the bottom, into a 10 or a 100 or a 1,000 of some sort? And so in this case, you can. You can make this you can make this into a 10 by multiplying it by 5. But you have to do the same to the top. And so what you get is you get 5 over 10. And then how do you say that? 5/10. And then so you just write 5/10 as a decimal. Now this one here, your 7 is going to be your whole number. So that's going to be in the front, and you just need to remember that. Now, same thing again. Can you take the 4 and make it into a 10 or a 100? Well, you can. You can make it into a 100 by multiplying it by 25. So you multiply the top and the bottom by 25. So you're going to get 7 75 over 100. So that's 7 75 hundredths, which is 7.75. Now, in this case, the 8 cannot go into 10 or 100 or 1,000. And so we need to do some division here. And so we need to take the first number and put it inside of the division bracket. And the 8 is going to go on the outside, and we need to divide. So 8 goes into 5 0 times. I need to add a decimal, bring it to the roof, add a 0, and bring it down. 8 goes into 50, 6 times for 48. 50 minus 48 is 2. I need to add a 0 and bring it down. 8 goes into 20 2 times for 16. 4, add a 0, bring it down. And 8 goes into 40 5 times evenly. And so my answer here is 0.625. That is my decimal. Now, we need to keep all of this in mind as we add percents into this as well. So, what is a percent? A percent is a number out of 100, okay? And so what we're going to do is this is called a 100 block, okay? So we're going to shade 20% of this hundreds grid, okay? And so 20% literally means 20%, which means 20 out of 100. So we're going to shade 20 of these little blocks here. And yours is going to look a lot nicer than mine. All right, so I just shaded 20% of the hundreds grid. Now it is 20% shaded, okay? Now shade 64% of this hundreds grid right here. Let's see if I can get a bigger pen. Nope, that's not going to work. I'm trying to be lazy here and it's not working. These are not my best coloring skills. All right, so there's 64%, okay? Now, let's shade 18% of this one. Okay, I shaded 18% of that one. Now we're going to shade 82.5% of this one here. So 82.5% of this one right here. Oh my. Okay, so here's my 0.5. So here's my 80, my 2, and then my half right here. Now, what percent of this grid is colored in? Okay, you should have gotten 47.5%. So this guy was an extra 5.5%. Okay, now, how do you actually convert between percents, decimals, and fractions? Okay, so let's start with fractions. What fraction of these triangles are colored in? Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 out of 10 that are colored in. Write this fraction in word form. 7/10. Okay? So, how do you write that as a decimal? 0.7. Now, how do we make this a percent? There's two different ways to do it. First off, you can take this right here, put it in your calculator, and multiply it by 100. Okay? But the easier way to do it without a calculator is to simply move the decimal point 2 places to the right, 1 and 2, and then fill in the spot. So that would be 70%, and that's it. So 7/10, 0.7, and 70% are all the same thing. Let's take a look at another example here. So what fraction of the triangles are colored in? We have 4 out of 10. How do you write that in word form? 4/10. Write that number as a decimal. So 4/10. Now, how do we take it from a decimal to a percent? You can do it two ways. You can take this and multiply it by 100, but the easier way is to move the decimal over 2 spots to the right, add a 0 if you need to, so then it is 40%. Just like that. Okay, so let's try this one here. Okay, so what fraction is this? This is 37 out of 100. How do you write that as a decimal? 37/100ths, 0.37. Now, how do I take this and make it a percent? Well, if I have 37/100ths, I take the decimal and move it 2 spots to the right, so now it's 37%. Now let me show you how to go the other way. If I gave you 37%, how do you make it a decimal? Move it 2 spots to the left and you have 0.37. Okay? Let's take a look at this one. What fraction is colored in? 1/4. What's 1/4 as a decimal? You should know this one. 0.25. Now, how do we make that a percent? Well, if we have 0.25, we move the decimal over 2 spots. That's 25%. How many sticks are colored in? 3 out of 10. How do we write that as a decimal? 0.3. Now we have 0.3. How do we make that a percent? Move the decimal over 2 spots to the right. Add a 0 if you need to. That's 30%. You need to make sure that you add the 0 there, though, if you need to. If you don't, you end up with 3%. 3% and 30% are very, very different. All right, let's try this one here. What fraction of the bars are colored in? We have 2/5. How do you write 2/5 as a decimal? Pause the video if you need time to do it. I'm going to keep moving ahead though. That's 0.4. How do you take 0.4 and make it a percent? You move it over twice. Add a 0 if you need to. That's 40%. So if I move it over to the right twice to make it a percent, how do I go from a percent to a decimal? I move it over to the left twice. Okay? Here, what fraction is colored in? 17/20. What is 17/20 as a decimal? That's going to be 0.85. 0.85, how do I make that a percent? Move the decimal over twice. 85%. Now, how many apples are red out of the total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 apples. But total, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 20. So, what is the decimal for this? Well, let's see, I can simplify that to 3/10, which would be 0.3. So if I have 0.3, I need to move the decimal over twice to the right, and so my percent is 30%. How many apples have been bitten? Well, last time I knew there were 20 apples. Now, how many have been bitten? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 have been bitten. I can simplify that again to 4/10. Now, I can simplify that again, but if I simplify it again, then I can't use the 10. So that would be 0.4. 0.4 into a percent, move it over twice, add a 0, that's 40%. Alright, so here's a little game where we're going to match it up. We need to take the tiles from the side and match it to the appropriate area. So here we have 0.5 as a decimal. What would that be first as a percent? If I moved the decimal point over twice, 1 and 2, I would have a 0 at the end of that. That would make that 50%. So what would this be then as a fraction? That's 5/10. So if I simplified 5/10, that's 1/2. Okay, now here I have 1/10. What's 1/10 as a decimal? Right here. Now if I move the decimal over twice, 1, 2, that would give me 10%. Okay, now here I need to find the decimal for 3/4, but it might be easier if I looked at the percent. So if I have the percent here, I move the decimal point backwards. It would be 0.75. There we go. So here I have 0.2, but I need the percent, so I need to move it over this way twice. So if I added a 0, it would be 20%. But what's the fraction? So that's 2/10. But what's 2/10 simplified? 1/5. Now here I have 1%, but if I move the decimal backwards twice and I added a 0, what would the decimal be? This guy right here. And what is the fraction for this guy? 1/100th. There we go. And there are the answers right there. All right, we're going to do a lot of practice with percents in class. So this is just the beginning, but let me know if you have any questions.